Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Wonderful.
I'm gonna move this way because I'm gonna bang. Ow! Sorry. I knew I was gonna bang.
So can you tell us a little bit about your character?
Yes, I play Beyonder Denninger, and I'm the wife of the captain on the ship, played by Brian. And definitely kind of the woman behind the man. Do a lot of, we launched in '63, so there's certainly there's a level of sexism on the show. But Beyonder's a very strong character, very manipulative character. She's one that fully believes in making it to Proxima, believes in the mission, and it will do anything in her power to stay in power. They were both born on the lower decks, so there's sort of a class structure, upper deck, lower deck situation going on as well. And they have worked their way and made their way to the upper decks to the ultimate position of power, the captain of the ship. And she wants to stay there.
Now you've described your character as you said, beautiful, manipulative, and dangerous.
I didn't say beautiful, but
okay, but all right,
what they said about it. But yes,
it's a given. But now that sounds very similar to a character you played in a show that I think a few of us have heard of. How, besides maybe the glowing spine, do the two differ?
Well, I'm human. This time, definitely, I am human. There are some parallels. Definitely different characters, but there are some parallels. She's a woman that's dealing with maybe being in a time and place where she would like to be able to do more openly. She was genetically paired with William. There is a love there. They definitely do love each other, but there's a lot of damage there as well. So the relationship is interesting for me because they are the power couple, but there's also a love-hate. There's a little bit of kind of House of Cards type relationship, a little bit of Virginia Woolf type relationship where they are working together as a partnership and a team, but there's a lot of damage. And I don't know if she thinks that he really wanted her as a wife. And they also weren't allowed to have children because they were, not everybody can have children because there has to be a certain number of deaths on the ship to be able to, not everybody can have kids because you're going to overrun the capabilities of the ship and how many people can be on it. So everybody has to have birth control implants. And every year there's a birthless ceremony. And if there's been 4 deaths on the ship, then 4 couples can attempt to have a child. And they were not ever chosen. So they never had the chance to have a child.
How many people can stay on the ship?
I think our group is about 600 people. So it's essentially a small town that will never know anything else but that small town. The future generations, our generation, we were born on the ship, we don't know anything else, and we may not live long enough to make it to Proxima. The next generation will probably see Proxima, and they will be the ones to try and inhabit the planet.
So I forgot to ask this question of the guys. So what are the clothes like?
There's definitely a hint of the 60s. We've taken some liberties where, the guys' pants, they were really not fully high-waisted, but the little bit, definitely a hint to it. Maybe a little bit more so with the females, but definitely. And I've got a little bit of the 60s hairstyle going on.
Are you wearing trousers or skirt?
Skirts, yes.
That's actually leads to my question, which is they kept talking about the fact that because the ship left in the 60s that everyone's kind of stuck in that time. But do you think logistically it makes sense that women wouldn't try to get women's rights again? Like even in that, because the movement was moving in the 60s. It was already moving, so why would it just stop? For 50 years.
It hasn't just stopped, but it hasn't maybe accelerated at the pace that it has on Earth. So if the adults that were all on the ship, that chose to go on the ship, if they were adults in '63, then their ideas are more from the 40s and the 50s, right? But there is I think a lot of people on the ship were progressive for that time, so there has been movement. It's not like we are stuck in the 60s, early 60s. It's its own kind of microcosm. It has developed in its own way. That's why we're not exactly matching everything, but there's more of a hint of it. I think it is developing, but slowly. Like Andrea's character is the doctor on the ship. So it's not that because she's a woman she can't be in that position. She's kind of the head of the psychology department and the doctors and the doctor on the ship. So it's not like every woman is at home baking cookies type thing or looking after the children. And also because there's not a lot of children, there isn't that need for people to necessarily, the typical roles of female and male roles. But there's more of a hint of it. So I think it's more. It's just it hasn't accelerated at the same pace that it did on Earth. And that's maybe something where we start seeing more of as we're going along. I mean, there's certainly the first episode opens with there's a bit of a terrorist organization on the ship, kind of a guerrilla faction that wants to return to Earth. So there is the start of dissension of people questioning. And I think as the generations go along, you start to get more questions. The first generation, our parents were the ones that decided to go on the ship. So we would have a lot more impetus and feeling of wanting to make our parents proud and everything like that. But the next generation, and in our society you find that too, as you go down generations, people start to question more and start to challenge and that type of thing. So that is happening, and so maybe that will start happening as we're going forward in the series.
And your character wants to keep going?
Yes, my character definitely wants to keep going. Yes.
Because she believes in the mission? Or?
Yes, she believes in the mission, and she's also in a position of power as well. So she wants to stay in that position. She kind of wants the status quo, but yeah, and there's a murder on the ship as well. We open with a murder on the ship of a young woman, and that is sort of the starting point of maybe the unraveling, because there hasn't been a murder, there hasn't been any violence of that sort. A couple of pub fights, that type of thing, but nothing of that sort. And you're talking about a small town, so if something happens like that, and then there's a lot of covering up by the people in power because they don't want to have that blame, who is my next door neighbor a murderer type thing, when you can't get off the ship. You can't go anywhere, so if you have this ship-wide panic, it's not going to do any good. So there's covering up, and then there's conspiracy, and then there's the people, the councilman that wants to show that the captain's been covering things up, and so there's a lot of elements, social elements and political elements that we deal with here, but it's just in a different form.
What about the food and drink? Is that 60s?
I haven't eaten on the show. Yes, I don't. I did have a martini on the ship, though, so I don't know. We're so new into filming that there's so many things that we actually haven't experienced yet, and there's also we're setting up this huge cast that I actually I haven't had that many scenes yet, so I'm still learning about my character. I don't have past episode 4.
Where's the filming taking place?
Montreal. Yeah.
So with it being a generational ship, are there areas of the ship that don't look like a ship, that look more like home or like a small town? You've mentioned small town. Is it set up to feel less like being on a spaceship in some areas, just to give people a sense of comfort, grounded?
Yeah, I think it definitely looks more like almost a cruise ship, more so than a maybe what Battlestar we would say. That looks much more like a military, like a warship or whatever. This has its little beach. Granted, you run into the walls. It has it's definitely more conducive to having people be on it for 100 years. There's a wonderful officer's lounge. It has an openness. It doesn't have a claustrophobic feel at all. But then there is the lower decks, which I can't speak with authority because I haven't been on that set yet. Because Beyondra is so far everything that I've shot has been on the upper decks, more the officers' quarters, the lounges, that type of thing. But there's the whole lower decks has a. That's where the machinery is. That's where and that's part of the class system too. So the people that are doing more of the blue collar jobs, that type of thing. There's animals down there. There's pigs and there's chickens and there's. But I wasn't on set that day.
Well, even cruise ships have engine rooms and functional
They do.
areas that are not
And
with the amenities that other parts would have.
And that's exactly like this. It has the engine rooms and then the tent to the engine rooms.
What about religion on the show?
Sorry?
Religion, do you have Christmas?
I don't know yet. I assume we will. Yeah.
Have you thought about the backstory of your character in your head? Have you compared notes of how you see your backstory with how the writers see it, or have you guys gotten that far in the discussion?
We have, it was. There's a limited backstory because the backstory is, of course, I've thought about my own backstory, and I have talked to Phil about it a little bit. But unlike being on Earth, where you could have kind of a multitude of backstories, it depends on what is influencing your life. There's limited on the ship influencing your life because it's the tin can that you're in. But yeah, my backstory is definitely starting out on the lower decks and wanting to be in a position of power and making it to be in a position of power. I think I have one line coming up in the next episode, something about him. I talked with my husband about, do you remember when I'm looking at the youth, and do you remember when we were, young and I was knock-kneed and trying to get into the stewardship apprenticeship, and you were like on a fast track for navigation, and so everybody has an apprenticeship, but there's only so much, a question was asked in the panel about arts and things, and I'm sure there are, but there's also not a lot of liberties, because everybody has a job, everybody has to have a certain amount of, the ship has to function, and it's not like you can go off on vacation and go to Thailand and take a break, and so everybody has their job, and so I don't think there's as much room, and there's not resources either, so you can't really waste anything. It's not like you can decide to do, an art project or put on a play and build a bunch of costumes for a particular play that are never going to be used again. But it's an interesting little thing that I think will come up is you get these people together, they have to have a creative outlet too, before you start to, people need a creative outlet. So I think that will start to come up.
So is there any significance to your name?
Not, I'm sure there is, all in Phil's mind.
Meat.
Oh, really? As a vegetarian, that's an interesting thing for me to consider. But Beyonder's not a vegetarian. But no, to my knowledge, I don't know of anything specific with the name.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.